John, welcome. Here we are, number 5
Hey, Greg.
in the Unscripted, and as you can see, we're joined by your two cohorts, Alan Bjorklund and Tom Fullerton. Welcome, guys.
Thank you, Greg.
Appreciate
Thanks,
you
Greg. Appreciate
making time. We're actually here for the quarterly MEC meeting.
Right.
And so this gives us a chance to sit down and talk, not only to yourself, but Alan and Tom as well. Well, I guess what we know is January's meetings didn't occur, and can you kind of give us an update to the status of what we're looking forward to sitting down with the company again?
Yeah, so there's still no change from the last time we talked with regards to February. We haven't been told they're canceled. We're hoping that those dates happen. We've made our druthers known through the ALPA representation department and through Captain Ambrosi that we would really like to see those days. But in the end, like I've mentioned just recently yesterday at the council meeting, when either party, in the bargaining process, when you go to the NMB, you end up and file for mediation and they accept it, you're ceding control of the process. And so when you have 5,000 type A plus pilots, which having an A plus behavior can help and hinder at times, it's definitely hard to give up control. And we are going to be responsive to whatever the NMB directs.
All right.
All right.
All right. Well, hopefully we'll hear shortly what February brings.
Right.
Some of the things, obviously, too, is now with the February bid pack, we're in for A to C.
Right.
Anything surprise you in terms of what you've seen from the company? And I know there was a little bit of discussion on the buy-up value and its calculation. You have any thoughts from your perspective on that?
Oh, I definitely have a lot of thoughts on this perspective. Well, I'll try to keep it fairly truncated. We've been very clear, the three of us, that even though they told us they were going to see, which we're going to in February, that we thought that it would be very harmful to the bargaining process because of the ambiance that it creates. I maintain that this is doing generational damage. It's going to be a long time before the active pilots here today forget about what's happening right now. In fact, they'll never forget. We believe that the SAM is, instead of being an indicator of what's going on with the airline, that the SAM's become the driver. Company management has chosen to do this, and now within C we find ourselves into, well, it is uncharted territory because C came into existence in the 2015 contract, and this is the first time that the companies availed themselves of this provision. And one of it is, the guarantees get lowered all the way down to, I believe it's 54 and 68 from 4 and 5 week month. And when they need to balance the lines within the spreads, they can use a buy-up value. What's been established by the company, and I heavily emphasize the company, is that for February it's a buy-up value of 58 hours and 45 minutes. We have no idea how they calculated that number. Marty Harrington in the PSIT doesn't know. And in fact, we're sitting here recording this podcast, our unscripted video, and in the same room, Marty went through a long explanation last week of how he thought they were going to calculate the BUV. He had basically two formulas, and then as he was catching his jump seat to go home at the end of the bill week, he got informed it wasn't either one of those. It was going to be this number. And so upon review of the script, we had to 86 a large portion of the podcast because it wasn't true. So in response to that, and having a discussion with Jose, we asked Jose to send over an email to Captain Domeno and Labor Relations asking us how the BUV was formulated and what are the implications are going to be with that. And Jose was ready to discuss it with them. The response that came back was no discussion was necessary and there'd be something out shortly. Well, what came out was the FCIF that everybody saw. What's still missing is how they calculate the BUV. I'm sure now after they see this video, they're going to give us an email like this is the way the world works with the BUV, just like this is the new way they calculate the SAM. But we're in new territory, and I think what the pilots really understand, it's not an equal thing across the board, unfortunately, but it is, on average, it's almost a 14% cut in guarantee.
Okay.
13.6 if I listen to them correctly. I might have my numbers right, but it's not insignificant.
Okay.
and the company's not in financial distress. I think that's what you need to understand,
Right.
and I know our pilots do.
One of the things I find interesting here is this theme of trying to get numbers from the company.
Right.
Tom, I know you're the data guy for this group. Seems to me, just with our conversation, this is an ongoing problem / dilemma. The transparency and their forthrightness with numbers that we need.
It is. Our committee and some of the individuals we have helping us, we have spent a lot of time reverse engineering through bid packs, data numbers to find out trends in data. We keep on asking the company for information so we can verify. And the reason we'd like to verify is because these items do have affect our crew members financially, and we want to make sure that with the data that we're gathering through the polling and everything, that there is no economic harm in what we negotiate through the table, and that we're using the most consistent. But the company tells us they pressure check a lot, and we still haven't received anything after the pressure checks. And they do, as I've told some of the members in the council yesterday, they do a great job of giving us the Heisman on the data.
It kind of almost boils down to respect. From my perspective, just being a line pilot, it'd be interesting to find out when other groups are negotiating with their management, if they too, those management sides, are as intransigent as FedEx seems to be with their data. Anyway, speaking of data, polling is always foremost every 6 weeks for us, and I had the chance to see polling for the first time the other day. I know, John, there's some people that say we poll too much. What do you guys use this data for? Why don't we see it? Your comments on polling and how you find it so vital to what you're doing at the table.
Well, the phone polling through the UNH that Phil Comstock has helped us with over the years is particularly helpful, more so than the online web surveys, because that has a lot of selection bias in it. But when you use a scientific sample to grab, about 600 pilots, they're able to get a very good pulse. The UNH does all the presidential polling as well, and political polling, so it's the same type of methodology. And what we have found over the years, especially working with Phil, is that based on our polling, and even though the questions, some of them aren't very specific, but he can deduce and extract information out of it that is really phenomenal. He's able, in our past, I know with the negotiations I've been involved with, he's been able to call the ratification rate within less than 5 percentage points margin of error. So we're in a new information age. Things are changing all the time. We don't want to be hamstrung with going, well, this is what the pilot said. Well, yeah, that was in 2021. The world's changed a lot since 2021. The world's changed a lot since the three of us took this job, with all sorts of different things. So we are going to poll every 6 weeks. In fact, before we walked in here, we just finalized the script that's going up to the UNH today. It's going to start again next Monday. We're on the books to do it with them for every 6 weeks. And in the end, we don't want to be surprised because we don't want you to be surprised. We are trying to be extremely transparent, and I'll talk about that here more in a second, with the polling results. And one of the things we've learned from talking with Paul Karg, who's the bargaining director at ENFA, who sits us at the table, and he's unbelievably talented, and he's just outstanding, is one of the things they did recently at Air Canada, I believe it was, is they've come up with flash polling. Like, say something pops up at the table that we haven't talked about before, we go, oh, that's interesting. So they'll be able to, if that's the case, grab a scientific sample of pilots, call them and go, well, what do you think about A? Or what about B? And so I could see where that would come into place, especially like in an area like retirement, right? We've got 3 options out there in retirement. We haven't received their response yet, and we might need to juke left or juke right or whatever with regarding what the membership wants, because we're hoping, if we do our job right, that when the TA comes out, after everybody flips open to Section 3 to see what the hourly rates are, which is what every pilot does, then it's just a big thud, and they go, oh, no surprise here. and more importantly, they're not picking up the pitchforks and lighting the torches.
Right.
So the polling's extremely important. We're going to continue to use it, and I would highly encourage anybody, if they receive a call with the UNH number, to please participate.
And Greg,
good. Yes.
as John elaborates, it does give us trend data of the engagement of the pilot force, and it also allows us to determine the ability of a ratification rate and if something would be ratifiable or not, and areas where we can move and where we can't move. So that's why the polling, we don't want the questions published early. I've been asked that question. I was like, that creates the bias. We want an unbiased opinion, and that checks the level of engagement of our crew members.
Right.
Let me follow up. You asked about the results, and we are trying to be as transparent as possible, but we're not going to lay out the playbook like, for the New England Patriots and everybody else to pick up and see what's going on, right? Yeah. But you can rest assured what we're communicating to you and what we're trying to achieve at the table is directly driven by the polling. It's not because we all three sat around, oh, we should do this and we should do that and get input from the MEC.
Right.
That's part of it, but it is largely driven by the polling and the membership interaction.
When I, again, yesterday had a chance to look at polling for the first time ever, and I saw how it was stratified and how, the data showed through the seniority list. And Alan, I know that you're on the junior side of that seniority list. Could you talk a little bit about your perspective, being at the table, what your priorities are, and how it all mixes in with our crew force and
Sure.
our blocks?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, first thing I can mention is during our council breakout yesterday, I had a few sidebar conversations about polling, and John had a great analogy a month and a half or so ago, and the analogy was one to looking out the sight of a bomber, and our survey data that's coming back gives us a lot of confidence in knowing that what we're doing is spot on, because when we're writing proposals, we're backing that up with data that's coming in from the survey data. And as John said, we are right on target. And despite what there might be a narrative out there that we're asking for too much, this survey data gives us a real good insight to what will ratify and what won't. And we've got to go towards, like what Tom said, the data, and that survey stuff is a huge part of the data. But we need to combine that with the stuff we're getting from the company as well, that
Sure.
Tom talked about.
Sure.
From my perspective, I see that being junior is, it's something that everybody's got to be for a short amount of time, but the goal is, eventually we'll start to build our seniority. What we're starting to see on the junior side is that goal of increasing seniority is likely going to be stymied for quite some time. So we've got to look at things in bargaining that benefit the junior guys, that gives us the assurances that the reasons we came here are going to persist, and that we're going to have a reasonable quality of life. We're going to make the kind of money that our peers make, and the confidence to know that we're not going to have the rug pulled out from underneath of us. When we came here, we were all taught about what the benefit of 4A, 2B, and C were. And that gave me and a lot of guys of my vintage and a lot of the guys that have been hired in the past 9 or 10 years the confidence to believe that we are different from the passenger carriers. But now we're seeing that which was sold to us as a huge benefit in our contract, we're seeing that used against us.
Right.
And as John said, that Sam's becoming the driver, and that's not what it was intended to do. But from a junior perspective, and I think this is what we're initially getting at, Greg, I apologize for going down my little rabbit hole. It is as important for me as a junior guy to be as cognizant about my vintage's needs and wants and desires at the table as it is to be concerned about what the most senior guys want, because if we can get done what we know we need to get done, we know that's going to be a pathway to better seniority for our junior guys, and the hope and goal that they'll be hiring down the road to support that increase in the seniority level.
All right, very good. You showed me a letter you received after you were hired here. Any chance you could possibly read what you
Yeah, I
you
can.
saw?
It kind of pains me to read this,
Right.
but I will do it. So as part of my offer letter, prior to that came a nice phone call from a fleet manager that said, I'd hit the jackpot, won the lottery, hired with the best and most desirable airline in the United States and potentially the world to go to work for.
Sure.
The second to last paragraph of this offer letter reads as follows. Finally, we appreciate the rigor involved in and applaud you meeting our challenging hiring standards. Successful candidates contribute a wealth of knowledge and experience to our mission and help FedEx Express maintain its long-held position as the express transportation leader. In turn, we are committed to supporting and cultivating pilot excellence both professionally and personally. State-of-the-art, well-maintained equipment coupled with an unsurpassed compensation package allows us to share success among our elite team of crew members. So,
Well, I was gonna say, I think we could leave it right there.
absolutely,
Says it all.
it does.
Says it all. Tom, from your perspective, what has surprised you most at the table?
The resistance of the company to provide accurate information and data for transparency. They've always told us about transparency and that we need to be transparent back and forth. I've seen it with letters that have been passed around between committees within the union and company officers, or not officers, but people of position in the company, and that data is just not there. My wife made a perfect comment to me, and she said, do they not understand that your positions are based on data that is driving economics? And I said, they do, honey. And I was like, that's probably the reason they don't want to provide that data.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, that's disappointing to hear. John, you got any other comments looking forward?
Yeah, I want to comment on what Tom
please.
said, and then, so like with data, what did we just say? When was the last day we bargained? December 13th or 14th?
yes.
Right. That was when we gave the scope presentation. We had requested back in November in Chicago, we wanted to see information, freight, volume for the purple, orange, and white on some city pairs from around the world inbound to the United States. And they said they'd get it to us. We requested other data that did come, but this which is one we think is the most important. On that very last day of bargaining, they said, they're pressure testing it, and they'd have it to us later that day. We still don't have that. Will we press on? Yeah, we're absolutely going to press on. But you're asking the pilots to sign on, to remain here and be solid in a career that provides some and hope of an advancement. So we're just one. Look, if what's on those airplanes is what they say it's on those airplanes, and it's white, low yield stuff that we shouldn't be flying, then that's fine. We just need to have a way to verify that, and we'll see where that goes. What I would say, people ask, Tom is our data person, and what he pointed out to us from the very beginning is, and he listens to the earnings calls and everything. Drive 2.0 was one of the big things, was taking $4 billion in cost out of the operation by the end of FY25. And just for those who don't study FedEx's fiscal year, it's June 1 to May 31st.
Okay.
So FY25 is going to end here at the end of May. And there's one more quarter to go starting in March, April, or May. So if they're trying to achieve $4.4 billion in savings, that almost could be viewed as being incongruent with achieving a pilot contract between now and then. Maybe that was always going to be the case. We don't know. Maybe they announce we come to an agreement because it takes a while to get it ratified and it turns on after June 1st. We have no idea. But I just know with all the emphasis that you see and hear about reduced cost here and there, that what we're trying to achieve is 180 out from what they're trying to achieve as a corporation. So it's not surprising that they've moved at the pace that they've moved at.
Okay.
And one of those were investor relation presentations, Greg. And it's still, every time I think about it, it's in my mind is there's I think it was $700 million that was coming from, and I just remember the picture of the pilot off to the left side of it. So 700 million from Air Ops or the crew force, is it via pay or is it during fuel? You know, that was a presentation that was made, and I was just, when I saw that, I was just like, I would love to have
Right.
a breakdown of it.
Right. So if you think about that, if you just, go with my theory of the case for a second, it explains why now we find ourselves in the sea.
Right.
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 And personally, this is my personal opinion, I think we probably would have ended up in where we are right now, even with the ratified TA. What would have been the best thing to do is have an early retirement so it would entice people to leave. Look, you and I are still here because the TA didn't entice us to retire. I wasn't going to get they had tiered the thing. I was going to end up in the second one, and I would have missed the third one by about 5 weeks if I stayed till all the way to the end. Meant I'm here, right? If it had done what it was supposed to do regarding their theory of alleviating 482C, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now.
Right.
But that's not where we are.
Yeah, unfortunately. I know one of the things that management has compared when we have our compensation package, they kind of said, well, you guys aren't Delta, United, you're cargo pilots. I think
Right.
we probably want to talk about what's going on at the end of the month.
Yeah, so we are going on the 28th. We're going to Louisville, and we're going to spend all day with the IPA Executive Board, which is also their negotiating committee.
Okay.
In fact, you're going with us, and we're gonna spend a day talking to Captain Travis and the rest of the IPA leadership, and we want to make sure we understand how they view the world. We're going to tell them how we view the world, because the last thing we want to do is propose anything at the table that would damage them. And I'm not saying that because we owe the IPA pilots anything.
Right.
We owe the profession to keep pattern bargaining going up and up. The IPA is our closest comparator, and I'm sure they're going to do the same for us.
Right.
And we're looking very forward to that meeting. We've never had a meeting of that kind with them since we've been with ALPA, so we're looking forward to that. You guys have any comments on that?
I'll just add, and Tom's got some good data points as far as the discrepancies we have from our monthly guarantees in contrast to UPS. I think it's a big deal. I mean, it can come down to more than a month's worth of salary, but it just makes me think of a recent video that was put out by FedEx management talking about the white network. One of the takeaways at the end was the white network will not result in the loss of any pilot jobs, and that's good to hear. But it's got to be, at the end of the day, a job that people think is worth having. And if now going into 482C results in a job that has us making 50% less than maybe our airline peers or passenger peers, and now potentially our other cargo peers, is that a job that people are going to stick around to or going to want to desire to look forward to in the future if they're at one point in time desired to come to FedEx?
Yeah. Tom, what are you looking forward to getting out of your Louisville trip?
Knowing how they're moving forward.
Yeah.
And it's not something I would ever want to tell anybody what their positions are, but
Right.
I would, like as John said, hey, if you look at the past of UPS, they've always been relative to the Delta rate, and they've done a nice job with a weighted average with the type of aircrafts they fly.
Yeah.
I mean, our guarantees right now, and I told these gentlemen, I was like, we're a couple hundred hours off their guarantee with the buy-up value, but that's their guarantee. They have an average line value and an average pay value, and those numbers are even significantly higher.
Yeah.
So that does affect overall compensation. And when people are like, well, you're putting a lot on the table, I'm like, well, if we're at a lower level, it's not as much. So a lot of the costing is done statically instead of dynamically,
Okay.
and it affects the overall compensation of the package.
Yeah. What I'm most interested is kind of like an outsider looking in, is how are their bargaining officers and guys sitting at the table representing IBA, how are they treated? What's the relationship professionally with the UPS negotiating team? And how does that contrast to the way we're treated at the table? So, John, let's just plan on doing another Unscripted
Right.
after that meeting,
You bet.
and let the membership know just what we were able to find out after sitting down with those guys for that day and late this month.
Absolutely.
One thing for the membership, I believe it was 2 Unscripteds ago, we talked about, hey, when you got revised, extended, please put in a DART. It's been fantastic. It's been just, we've been overwhelmed with your response. We're also going to ask that if you have a fatigue event, make sure you also file a DART into the system, and that will further inform us on what's going on out there in the line. So we appreciate your support. I know John, Alan, Tom do as well, and we look forward to talking to you after the Louisville trip. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.